Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses. We are live. It's Tuesday evening here on the YouTube channel. Good evening to all of you that are joining us live on the show tonight. Coming up on the episode, we will look back at the weekend's win against Queen's Park that sees the Dons through to the Cup quarter-final and reaction, of course, to that draw as well. We will then discuss all the latest transfer rumours because, of course, there is some rumours just now around an incoming striker, and Ryan Duncan has left the club. So thoughts from Phil on that as well. And we'll be joined a little bit later on by Laurie Finlayson from the KFC View podcast. He has been on, of course, last season. He's sitting in the green room. That's how fancy we can make this podcast, Phil. So he's hearing everything we're saying and seeing everything that's coming in on the comments. But he will join us shortly. But Phil, first of all, how are you doing after that weekend's win?
Not too bad. Yeah, like I say, it was a bit. My lack of fingernails that I already had were wearing a bit thin towards the end, but yeah, we got through, which is the main thing. So yeah, feeling a bit better now.
Yeah, feeling a bit better. And as Ashbrook House says, congrats on 2K, guys. Yes, thank you very much to everyone that has subscribed here over on the YouTube channel. We have finally hit 2,000 subscribers. We've actually had a really good week since the last episode, Phil. I don't know if it's your addition or Callum's return to last week, but it's the first time we've had, I think it was over 1,200 listens as well, combined with the near 1,200 views we've had on the podcast. Obviously, joining the Sports Social Podcasting Network out on audio has really helped expand, and also probably a thanks goes to all of you that tune in and have since shared the podcast maybe with your friends and family as well. It's great to see kind of the reach that the podcast is reaching. But Phil, probably what also helps is the feel-good factor being created by Jimmy Tilleen. Of course, the weekend's win helping him get to 7 wins out of 7. But as you said, it wasn't without being a nerve-wracking affair. He didn't show any real disrespect, I guess, to Queen's Park. It was a full-strength side. The only change was Slobodan Rubezic coming out. Didn't make the matchday squad at all. And Jack Milne coming in. But I don't really know what to say, because it wasn't for the lack of trying in that first 45 minutes. Both Gavin Malloy and Pat Habib Gay having decent headers, well saved. But Queen's Park also having probably the better openings of the two teams.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think I'm not sure if Ruby was maybe suspended, which kind of forced his hand to bringing in Milne, who I thought actually played pretty well. In fairness to him, at centre half, but yeah, I don't know what it was. I mean, like we sort of discussed last week, we thought that Aberdeen were going to come out with that sort of quick swashbuckling style of play we've had recently, but I just think in the first half our movement wasn't quite there. We'll come on and discuss the change in the second half later on, but yeah, I just feel like we just didn't really have enough, sort of quickness and enough sort of dynamic movement in our front line. And like I say, I think it allowed Queen's Park to catch us on the counter a little bit. So yeah, it was a strange first half, considering how strong we sort of lined up compared to other weeks as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of, I was maybe a bit surprised by Queen's Park's setup to catch us on the counter, and they did that very well in the first 45 minutes. But you know what? I actually felt a little bit sorry for Shayden Morris on Saturday. I thought he was extremely creative. It was just unfortunate that what seemed to be throughout the 90 minutes up until we got to injury time, that final ball or final attempt on goal was lacking really any sort of quality. What did you make for both Shayden and Pap's performance in the first 45 minutes? I know I texted you during the first 45. As Colin Gale points out, Jimmy Tilleen commenting on the fact that Pap was replaced at halftime because he was on a yellow card. Probably up there with Vinny as the most needless yellow card picked up, and a bit of frustration. But what did you make on those two particular players' performances?
Yeah, I mean, it was, like you say, I think, for no lack of trying, Morris was trying to get something going. They're just, like I say, there just didn't really seem to be much to hit in the box, which, maybe on another day when we did have maybe the likes of, Shinnie and, Bissowan or whoever sort of flooding at the back post, it could have been a different story. I remember saying to you that I don't think I really saw Gay run in the first half. Everything just seemed to be at such a leisurely pace, which is fine. That's sort of the player that he is at times. But there were just moments where you're just thinking, just go and bust your gut and make an overlap here, or just do something. It's like walking around at the edge of the box was a little bit frustrating at times. But yeah, like I say, I think there just needed to be a little bit more in terms of options in the box. I felt like Sockler was, again, trying his best to be a nuisance, but when Queen's Park are sitting with 4 or 5 players in the box, you're going to struggle to pick one man out, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the thing. I think there was an opportunity Nicky Devlin had when he broke into the box, and instead of pulling it back, I think both Pat McGrath and there was somebody else all waiting in the middle, and Nicky Devlin shot, and when he kind of looked up afterwards and he was like, punched the ground in frustration, probably realizing he was being a bit too selfish. Stephen McPhee Music is saying folk are watching Shady Mo like a hawk, ready to judge. Fact is, he plays okay, but everything is being scrutinized. Probably up there with both him and Vinny, 2 players fighting for that starting jersey. I know we debated that last week as well, but they're probably both victims of each other, that like opposing player success. When Vinny comes on and has an impact, it maybe highlights what Shayden Morris doesn't do. And then if Vinny has a poor game and Shayden Morris does something good, it highlights Shayden Morris in a good light.
Yeah,
it's probably just because of that area of the pitch is the one we're crying out for at this minute in time.
Yeah, and as well, I think, they're victims of being on a, fair bit of fan backlash last season as well, which doesn't help. Although Jimmy's wiped the slate clean, I think a lot of fans are still sort of coming in with that sort of preconceived notion that neither of them, as I keep on seeing on Twitter, neither of them are the answer. So it's, it is tough for them. And like I feel like we've kind of said on the podcast the last few weeks, in fairness to Shayden Morris, I think he's played quite well for the most part. There's maybe bits of his game which are lacking, and his decision making is maybe not completely up to par. But in terms of the options we've got out wide, I think he's doing a good job in terms of, like, say, being a bit of a ball carrier. And as we saw against Queen's Park, trying to be that sort of creative outlet, which at times did get him caught out, but at least he was trying something.
Yeah. Jack Milne, as we spoke about, came in for his first start of the season, replacing Slobodan Rubezic in a maybe unnatural position for Jack. Coming in at centre back, we saw him last season, of course, at right back, a player that's had to transition from being a centre mid by trade into defence. It's something that Neil Simpson was kind of keen to do, because that midfield is flooded at Aberdeen, and he's obviously a player that the club rate highly enough that they want to move him into a position that we can retain his services. I've seen obviously discussion on Twitter that he could be the next Ross McCrory hybrid, in the fact that he's that versatile, that he's potentially a player that can't quite nail down one position as his own, and that could potentially be Jack's downfall at the club. How did you feel he got on on Saturday? Because personally, I thought he was a little bit uncomfortable at times. We saw the poor back pass that led to a fantastic opportunity for the visitors. But credit where it's due to Jack, because he didn't drop his head from that mistake. He fought back and ultimately blocked the attempt on the line to clear the danger. But overall thoughts on Jack's performance?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, his utility might be a downfall. I think could really play into his hands. The type of player that is just wanting to play football, no matter what. But also, I think, kind of shows his natural ability as well, that he can fill in, multiple different roles. But yeah, like I say, I mean, I think there were times where his positioning did let him down, which, like we've said in previous episodes with Morris and Duncan as wing backs, it's not their position. We shouldn't really be surprised if they get caught now and again. But what I did like was his ability to get his foot on the ball. And like I say, even after the mistake, he wasn't shying away from taking it in rather tight spaces and trying to get the ball moving forward. And I thought he was relatively steady. Again, another new centre half partnership between him and Malloy. So I was actually pleasantly surprised with him at centre half. There's no doubt he's quite a physically imposing lad. So I think he may well find that centre half is a position he's more suited at. But yeah, I thought, other than his mistake really in the back pass, I thought he looked relatively comfortable for the most part.
Musical Box, probably agreeing there, wasn't perfect, but hasn't played in that position for quite some time. Interested to hear your thoughts from this comment here from Lewis Johnson, where he says, I think a loan to a championship or premiership team would serve him very well. If he was going to a premiership team, what team, I suppose, would you think would suit him best? I've seen Ross County being mentioned. Would top end championship be better than bottom end Premiership potentially?
I mean, potentially. I think again, it's all sort of comes down to the sort of role that the club wants to iron out for him. Are they wanting him to be a holding midfielder? Are they wanting him to be more of a fullback? Are they wanting him to be a centre half? And I think that really would influence the team he goes to. I personally think he looks more of a right back to me than he does a centre half. If we are going to be sort of ironing him out as more of a defender, so yeah, I think it's really tough because you don't want him to go to the likes of a County or a St Johnstone where he really can't get his foot on the ball. He's just there to hoof it long and head stuff away. You kind of want him to get that little bit of experience of, maybe getting on the ball, being in a side that's maybe winning, playing a little bit of football. So it is, again, I think it's tough, and it all comes down to where he wants to sort of have his position be, but also where the club kind of wants him to end up playing.
Yeah, and I guess, Stephen McPhee arguing there's no reason why Jack can't stay and fight for his place in that centre-back area. Of course, Angus MacDonald was finally fit enough for the bench at the weekend, and I'm sure he might have something to say about that as well. Obviously, Rubezic will come back into the matchday squad for the weekend's visit of Kilmarnock, if it goes ahead. Just making sure how much attention Laurie's paying to that comment. We'll see, obviously, on that one. We'll speak about that one in a minute. Another player that, I guess, to quote Stephen, in terms of being watched like a hawk, is Esther Sokler. Esther Sokler, we spoke about going into this game, it would be ideal if he could grab a goal and boost his confidence. He did bag a goal, but once again, when Esther Sokler is one-on-one and bags a goal, the linesman rules him offside. And having seen the replays back, obviously VAR was not in operation at Pittodrie this weekend. I'm assuming that was a club decision on terms of saving cost, because I think it was only in operation at Hampden and Parkhead, if I'm right. But yeah, Esther, really unlucky to see the flag go up for that decision. But overall, thoughts on his performance? Is he getting too much stick from the Aberdeen support at present?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like I say, he's getting watched like a hawk, but the linesman's not exactly following suit. But yeah, it's a tough one. We kind of spoke about it the other week where he struggles with getting compared to Miovski, and I'm not blaming people for doing that. It's natural. We've just lost, our top goal scorer, and he's sort of currently the only one there that's credibly able to fill the boots. So I do feel sorry for him. I do think he just needs that little bit of support. He seems like you say, a confidence player, but the kind of guy that maybe does just need that arm around the shoulder at times, just to sort of remind him that he's more than capable of being a top quality striker. And he's showing it. Some of the goals that he's scored in his time at Pittodrie are the sort of goals that you would expect. A Shankland, a Miovski, a Kyogo, you're leading number 9 for a team to be taking. So no, I do feel sorry for him, but it's another one that's just not gonna count. And it's because he took it so well. The ball through was perfect, but he took the goal so well. And it's just unfortunate, like to say, that that VAR wasn't in operation. I'm not sure if it was based on the fact that obviously we're playing a lower league opposition. I don't know if it's maybe an SFA stipulation that VAR is not used, but
no, I don't think it's that, because obviously last season we saw Bucky Thistle get taught how to deal with VAR when they visited Parkhead. As far as I'm aware, it's on a club by club basis because of the costs, and obviously I guess, either mutually agreed with Queen's Park or decided ourselves it wasn't being used. But unfortunately, as Forrest McFarlane says, he's just not getting the rub of the green at this moment in time, and we'll see, of course, if that changes this Sunday. I suppose another talking point, Phil, from the game at the weekend comes. We've spoken a lot about managers' reactions to losing to Aberdeen this season. Stephen Robinson was extremely bitter. Craig Levine was very confused that, by saying that his St Johnstone team were largely the better team. But Callum Davidson actually was kind of almost full of praise, but more so for the support, speaking about how the fans stayed with the team the longer the game went on. And I would probably agree with that assessment. And I think that is more down to the fact that Jimmy and the players stuck to this philosophy that he's trying to implement. We stuck to that style of pass and move. There wasn't really kind of 1 ounce or indication that we were a way to hoof the ball up at the centre backs and just hit and hope in that last 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think, in times gone by, the longer it stays 0-0 against the likes of Queen's Park, the longer it stays 0-0 even against the likes of Livingston, in seasons gone by, you do feel people getting on the players' backs. There were pockets of frustration. I can't lie. A couple of the misplaced passes and, a couple of poor refereeing decisions did kind of put my head on Mars for a quick minute. But, it feels much easier to, like you say, stick with the players just now, I think, because not only have we shown our ability to sort of win games in the second half and kind of keep on playing till the last kick of the game, I think it's just this sort of togetherness that Jimmy has built. Obviously Nielsen was out. The club put out a little bit on social media of Nielsen saying that the entire team in the city needs to feel that sort of togetherness in it.
Yeah,
it sort of does feel like that, and it does kind of, I think it makes Pittodrie become less of a toxic place at times. As we saw last season under Robson, at points it did get rather horrific at points. So
yeah,
and I think Davidson's right. If you're a lower league manager coming to a bigger ground, the first thing you want is the fans to turn a little bit. So I think that probably ruined his game plan ever so slightly of the sort of low block and keeping it as close as he could.
Yeah, I guess this goes to a point that Paul Donaldson made before we even came live, speaking about how well Queen's Park defended, but as the match went on, it felt like a goal would only come from a set piece or we'd need a moment of real quality. We definitely got one from Keskinen. We're going to come on to that. But did you feel as the game progressed, extra time was inevitable? It's certainly on my behalf, I felt we were definitely going, although admittedly I didn't know if it was straight to penalties or we were going to be having to endure another half an hour of one-way traffic in resolute Queen's Park defending. Adam Head, although, saying he knew he would score, and we did with a cracking finish. Did you feel that goal was coming though?
I want to say yes, but it was like I said, the longer it went on, the more it just felt like it was just going to be one of those games where we're going to hit the bar in the 94th minute, or something was going to go awry. Another sort of marginal offside goal at the death. It just felt like it was just going to be one of those afternoons. And like you say, it was all one-way traffic, and I think that's again probably why the atmosphere didn't turn too sour, because it wasn't like we're getting hit on counter after counter here, and it's like we're now holding on for the last 4 minutes. It was really all Aberdeen. So it was a little bit touch and go there for me.
I think though this comment from Dan D is quite interesting, because for me, reading the comment kind of flicks me back to the opening day of the season against St Johnstone. He says, even when we've not played great this season, I felt pretty comfortable and looks like the players feel the same, as never looks like they're panicking, just continue to keep playing the same way. And the St Johnstone game, obviously, own goal apart until, although people come back and watch our initial full-time reaction, they probably didn't think we were sitting comfortably. But Saturday especially, it felt that the players knew the instructions, they knew, and I think, there's been a few comments about, whilst we've been speaking about kind of maybe previous managers, that instruction and clarity on what they should be doing once they cross that white line wasn't clear. It certainly does now, and there isn't that panicking that, as kind of we've spoken about, would resort to hoofball football.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes from Jimmy just trusting the players, and I think there's been a few.
And probably them trusting him.
Well, exactly. I mean, trust has to go both ways. But I think he puts a lot on sort of trusting his players to make the right decisions and trusting his players to dig in and get results. And I think, as we've probably discussed too much last season in terms of some managerial comments in press conferences. A lot of players would probably get to that point and go, oh, well, I've been called hopeless by my manager, so I'm probably hopeless now if I can't score against Queen's Park. But I think there's that sort of air where the players do have that little bit of confidence. At times, maybe a little bit of swagger, but we come on to that a little bit with the sort of changes on the wing. And I think that it does just help us grind out those wins when it needs to happen, and we can just sort of dig in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we've got players on the bench, still not entirely convinced about the quality and the strength coming off that bench at this moment in time, especially at the top end of the pitch in the striking area. But Vinny came on at halftime to replace Pap, as we've discussed the fact that he was on the yellow card and Jimmy was concerned because of his physical nature he was going to get himself sent off. Vinny overall for me had a decent impact, very direct and linked up well with Jack McKenzie. Was one opportunity, it wasn't on the Premier Sports highlights package that I've watched, where I feel he really should have done better squaring it to Keskinen, who would have had a simple tap in much earlier than when he did. And of course, we've got to speak about Topi, who came on, fantastic debut. Or I'm so glad Sam Gordon's jumped on board with the puns as well. A fantastic goal to save, I guess, our blushes a little bit in terms of dragging that game into extra time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, like you say, I think Vinny was really direct when he came on, and the square ball you're on about, I do think he maybe got into his head a little bit about it and
100%.
Let it linger a little bit. The frustration, obviously, getting the booking later on for not getting the foul, but I think it all kind of bundled into one. But no, I thought it was really good. The one thing that sometimes does annoy me a little bit about Vinny is he just wants to take his man on too many times. There were a few times towards the end there where you're just thinking, just get the ball in the box, please. But no, for the most part, like you said, I think his direct running kind of allowed us to stretch the game a little bit and pull that sort of really compact low block Queen's Park out a bit. And yeah, Topi, thank God. Thank God. Oh, Jesus, not another one.
Well, it was a great finish. That one lands itself to being a pun. And I guess, as Sam Gordon said, Topi's also going to have Topi marks from most of the Aberdeen fans from that debut performance. Overall, were you impressed by what you saw?
Yeah, no, I thought the main thing that stood out to me was how hungry he was to get the ball. Being in the south, he was kind of on the right wing for the most part. And pretty much any time somebody got the ball in midfield, he was always sort of signalling for it to go in behind the channel, which is exactly what you're wanting from your winger. But as well, he was deceptively strong, I thought. The amount of times he was able to pin and roll a defender. We came on, I thought, oh, he's a bit smaller than I thought and looked a bit sort of scraggly. But yeah, he could hold his own. So I think he will be quite a good threat. And yeah, what a way to score your first. He took it so well in the half turn. For your first game in Scottish football, it's it doesn't show any sign of nerves or not being composed, does he?
No, and I think that was the kind of clear thing when I spoke about that first half. We were lacking that little bit of quality and composure. Topi showed that with how he controlled the ball, as you say, and then finishing it beyond the Queen's Park goalie. But I think the way we passed and moved the ball for that last 10, 15 minutes, you saw Queen's Park ringing the changes defensively. We were pulling them and pushing them in all different directions, trying to open up that space, and we eventually got that one moment of quality. And I think, this wasn't just a ball into the box. It was a well-placed diagonal ball out wide, 2 or 3 passes, and it's actually once again Nielsen with a superb, almost defense splitting pass, but excellent control, as we've said, from Topi. Finishes it with aplomb, power into the back of the net, and we're through to the next round. Overall, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't perfect, but cup competitions, it's about getting through, Phil, and we've been rewarded with a home tie against the lowest ranked team, Spartans, at home in the quarterfinals for an opportunity to get to Hampden in a semi-final. You can't complain, can you?
No, no. Like I say, we could have had the same fate as the third biggest force in Scotland, or so they like to claim, Heart of Midlothian, and being punted out by lower league opposition. And to draw Spartans at home, we couldn't ask for any better. I'm not going to say too much because I'm pretty sure last episode I said that we were going to comfortably dismantle Queen's Park. So maybe I'll do the reverse psychology and say it's going to be another nail biter, and we'll turn them over by 5 or 6. Who knows? But yeah, you couldn't really ask for a better draw from an Aberdeen perspective.
No, you couldn't, and I think we've been quite fortunate this season how favourable our cup draws have been. But you've just kind of reminded me of something that I want to ask you about before we move on to the transfer talk section. Was the fact then that we only won that game 1-0 at the weekend almost a blessing? Because had we gone into that game and maybe brushed Queen's Park aside 4-5-0, obviously player confidence would have been high, but fan confidence and possibly expectation would have been seriously increased. Has this kind of kept our feet on the ground, maybe kind of reined in some of that expectation for us? A bit of a reality check, I guess.
Yeah, well, that was exactly what I was about to say. I think as much as we've been riding the feel good wave for the last few weeks,
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit of a stark reminder that there is still work to do and there is still improvements to be made in the squad. Even just comparing the first half to second half, there's still bits of Jimmy's philosophy that do need to be sort of ingrained fully into the squad. So maybe like you say, maybe it is a blessing in it. Even for the players, it'll maybe just get them working that little bit harder. Because there's nothing worse than a squad that maybe thinks they're untouchable. So even in terms of the fact we actually got players warming up at half time, was a little bit of a change to the past few weeks. So maybe it is just a constant reminder to everybody that there's work to be done and potential changes to be made.
Yeah, I noticed also Graham Kirk's out with the substitutes, helping them warm up. Um, I noticed that in both home games. I've not noticed that in any of the away games, but interesting that he's now out with them rather than remaining in the dugout. And I suppose one final positive as well is that the South Stand clock now includes injury time, which I've been longing for, and I believe as well for those in the South Stand, there is now a little clock next to the home dugout along the advertising board as well. Shows how much you paid attention to that. I can see
I
you.
was about to say, I'm always looking over my shoulder and cracking my neck.
But yeah, it's the small things like that keep me going. Right, let's look at the transfer talk then, Phil, because Ryan Duncan has joined last weekend's opponents, Queen's Park, on a season-long loan. Good move for Ryan, opportunity for him to show Jimmy what he can do, of course, contracted till 2026, so likely he will return to the squad in the summer, or do you think this is him almost like last chance saloon, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I think the loan move will be good for him. I think he's needed it. I think he was potentially scapegoated a little bit at times. in the past, so it'd be nice to see him getting that regular run of games. I'd be interested to see where Queen's Park utilise him though, because if it looks like they tend to play a back three with wing backs, where he didn't look too comfortable when he's played there for us. So I don't know if they're going to be maybe putting him more as sort of a 10 or a striker. So I think it'll be. I mean, I'm quite interested to see that where his role potentially gets carved out there. But no, I think it's a good move for him. And like we saw as well, Queen's Park can actually play a little bit of football. So it will be nice to see him getting on the ball and maybe being that creative force along with like Dom Thomas, and he's got a good target man who hopefully doesn't hit the ground as much in the Championship in Zach Rudden. So hopefully there'll be plenty of chances for him, tally up a few assists and like I say, be that creative outlet.
Yeah, right. The one player that a lot of people want to hear our thoughts on, John Ironside would be interested to hear our thoughts on the Kevin Nisbet rumour, asking, is he a good shout? Personally, he thinks it's low risk if a loan and a chance for Thielen to help him get his career back on track. This is the rumour, of course, that Aberdeen are interested in signing Millwall striker and former Hibs striker Kevin Nisbet on loan. Thoughts then, Phil?
I mean, we could be looking at a lot worse, put it that way. Personally, I don't think, again, I'm going to use the Twitter term here, I don't think he's the answer. He's down the pecking order at Millwall for a reason. He's been hit with quite a fair few injuries as well. A loan move doesn't fill me with too much optimism. It's that sort of square holes with round pegs scenario where, if he comes to us and scores 25 goals, brilliant, but then he's back off to Millwall and then probably gets a decent move somewhere else.
Yeah.
If it was a relatively low transfer fee, I'd maybe be slightly more on board with it because then, at least he's our asset at the end of the day. But yeah, I think in terms of a 9, I'd much rather take somebody on a permanent and as well somebody that's maybe, been in and about a squad for the past season.
Yeah, Musical Box saying he could be good, but he's not convinced he's the caliber we need.
There's no doubt that he's a good striker. He showed it at Hibs and he showed it at his time further down the leagues. He is a good striker, but I'm sort of the same as Musical Box. I just don't think he's quite what we're needing. I'd much rather us sort of persist with Sockler and try and get him firing.
I think for me, where I am on it is, I mean, I'm happy to persist with Sockler, but Peter Ambrose, I mean, I know it's still early in the season, hasn't shown enough off the bench for me to go, it's all right if Sockler falls down with an injury.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, definitely.
I trust Peter. I don't think any Aberdeen fan could confidently sit here and say, if Esther picks up an injury, we'll be okay.
But then, is Nisbet really going to come up and sit on a bench in Aberdeen when he could quite happily sit on a bench in London?
Well, so again, this is, Dandy speaking about Kevin Nisbet's attitude. You've spoken about the injury problems and the fitness. I did have to laugh at Martin Stone's comment on Twitter saying, well, we've already got one overweight striker. Okay, he's not currently at the club. Do we, or should we then be looking elsewhere? I think in terms of going back to the comment from John Ironside about being low risk, it's a low risk if Millwall are still picking up a chunk of his wages. The concern for me is that down in the Championship, that is going to be a big chunk of wages that we could be paying on a striker that over the last couple of years has had a pretty poor injury record. And we also have to look at the manner in which he left Hibs was probably in the Duke manner and how he's handled that situation. So is that the type of striker that we want in terms of going back to that comment from Dandy, in terms of attitude? Is that what Jimmy Tilleen wants to integrate? But as David McLennan says, Alfie Bavidge, does he get a chance? Does Fletcher Boyd get a chance? It'll be interesting to hear what the plans for those two strikers are between, well, now and the end of August, because of course them two would be up for loan moves, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose, like you say, now and the end of August isn't really far. And I think I did see someone on Twitter saying that, the signing of Nisbet on loan screams an 11:59 deadline day signing. And I'm almost inclined to agree with it, because that is kind of what it feels like. It feels like we're kind of getting to a point where we're going, we need somebody, we just need somebody that's available. I'm hoping, our extensive scouting network is doing a little bit behind the scenes to unearth the next Bojan, as rare as that might be. But yeah, I'm leaning probably more sort of 70-30 towards he's not really, I think, the solution to our current problem. Like you say, affects the chances of young guys, but as well, I just feel like there's probably a better option somewhere.
Yeah, I guess as well, we've seen it plenty of times. Just now, it could just be a smokescreen from the agent, just trying to promote their player and get their name out. Obviously, we saw that last week when we were speaking about Adama Sidibe. It's very much been agent driven, dropping Aberdeen's name into it, knowing the fact that we've got money on the back of Bojan, trying to drum up interest from other clubs. So it'll definitely be one that will rumble on, and I'm sure be talked about in the pre-match pints ahead of the game this weekend. And I suppose we should bring in Laurie now. Laurie, welcome back to Red Tinted Glasses. Good to have you on. It's been an eventful start to Killie season so far, obviously progressing to the UEFA Conference League playoff round. How have you found the season so far? Because domestically, certainly, it hasn't gone to plan.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, domestically, it's been pretty woeful, dare I say it. But I mean, Europe has been a good adventure, it has to be said. But I mean, domestically, it's been a struggle, and I mean that's kind of to be expected. And it was something that I was interested to ask you guys about, because I kind of get the fear that we're going to, and excuse this phrase, do an Aberdeen this season. But you know what? I'm looking forward to the tie against Copenhagen. I mean, it's one of those ones that almost feels like a free hit. If dare I say it, it almost is free hit territory really. And if we can get a result against Copenhagen, that'd be unbelievable. I mean, financially, that would leave us in a pretty good position, wouldn't it?
Well, it would certainly help you install that grass pitch, of course, that's coming at the end of this season. It's interesting because you've used the term free hit. We'll address the elephant in the room just now then, because Derek McInnes, after your defeat to Motherwell at the weekend, kind of brought up the subject of that Kilmarnock are potentially going to look at discussing with the SFA and the SPFL about potentially postponing the weekend's fixture against Aberdeen. I'll ask Laurie your opinion first, Phil, and I'll come to you after. Where are you on this debate, Laurie? Obviously, as a Kilmarnock fan, are you supportive of the club's decision to look at postponing the Aberdeen game?
Well, I would say I'm supportive of it in the sense of I very much hope it happens, and I feel like it should happen for the good of Scottish football. But to be honest, I don't necessarily think it will happen. But then again, Aberdeen and, well, Derek McInnes, you could argue, have a little bit of a previous with this. I don't remember if it was a Groningen game off the top of my head, but I want to say 2014. Aberdeen did manage to get a domestic game postponed for a European tie. So maybe it can be done, but I'm not convinced it will happen. But I think Killie would maybe need the extra few days, going by how our domestic games have gone thus far. So if it were to happen, although I do think it's unlikely, I would very much be behind it.
Laurie, maybe if you stopped playing the majority of your domestic games with 10 men, it might have helped slightly in terms of the fitness levels. Phil, your thoughts when you first heard the discussion of potentially postponing the weekend's game?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, like you say, I think Scottish football benefits if Kilmarnock can benefit. And obviously, like you say, as the underdogs, no pressure on them. If they can get through against Copenhagen, it'd be good to see. I think it's a tough one because we're getting close to the 11th hour now in terms of actually making the decision to postpone it. But Yeah, I'm for it if it's sort of almost that unwritten rule in terms of Scottish football that occurs, and I think that's the only reason that there is such a hullabaloo about this, because it's not the norm as much as a league like Scotland it probably should be. But yeah, I see both sides of the argument. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can be.
Yeah, I hope you're not getting too many splinters from sitting on that fence, Phil.
Yeah.
Certainly lots of comments coming in on this discussion. We'll bring some of them up, but my first reaction to hearing the talk of postponing the game was, and Laurie kind of pulled on the comment you've just mentioned about the game being a free hit. And I assume amongst most Kilmarnock fans, the expectation going into this game is relatively low, given, of course, Copenhagen's European pedigree we saw last season, although I know they struggled in the last round. I mean, that penalty shootout against the Czech opposition is probably one of the worst penalty shootouts you'll ever see if you get the chance to actually watch it. But what's the point in postponing the game this weekend? If you go and lose 4 or 5-0 on Thursday, you're pretty much out anyway. So what does having the weekend off benefit Kilmarnock in that sense? Would it not have made more sense from a Kilmarnock point of view to have your cup game against Motherwell postponed, Laurie?
I think that is very much a valid argument to make, Glenn, because as you say, there is a chance, much as I hope it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
there's a chance that we go over to Denmark and get smashed and it's tie over. At which point this would all seem like a bit of a pointless kind of endeavour, really. I'm fairly confident that Derek McInnes would argue that not having the game on would give us a bit more time on the training pitch, because he was complaining about that after we got comfortably beaten by St Johnstone. So I think that would be Derek McInnes' line. But to be honest, Glenn, I'm with you on that one. Maybe postponing the cup game would have been more helpful, especially as well. We played half of it pretty much with or more than half of it, including every time, with 10 men. And B, well, as I kind of alluded to there, it was 120 minutes, which frankly we didn't need.
Yeah, I know that was probably the first thing that I laughed at when I saw the game went to extra time, was thinking how that's going to benefit us in a week's time after you get the ball passed about for 90 minutes in Copenhagen. But of course,
the other thing as well is, if the game does get postponed, and Killie do pull off a miracle and beat Copenhagen, is then where do you slot the game in? Because that was a problem we struggled with last season with our postponed games. It was sort of like you've then got them ramshacked into at a sort of week-long window where you're playing 3 times, and it's just it's a tough line to kind of balance, really.
I think the problem as well is, you look at the game, we're 7 games into the season. That's one of the comments that's come up already, and I know Laurie's not going to probably like some of the comments here because not all the Kilmarnock fans are here to back him up. But John Keelock saying Killie have played 7 games this season. If they can't cope, then go home. I think in general, though, Sam Gordon saying it's a good idea, no doubt, but should have been discussed and decided in the off season. Similar thoughts from Paul Donaldson. Would like to be able to help other clubs in Europe. It's too short notices. Our supporters bus already booked for Sunday. Many fans will already have booked trains and hotels. And of course, Paul, on that last point, probably not just meaning Aberdeen fans. There'll have been Kilmarnock fans that once you got through against Tromsø, changing their travel plans to accommodate coming up to Aberdeen on the Sunday. I think in principle, it is a good idea, and it is something that should be looked at. And now it's going to have to be looked at the end of the season, that Scottish clubs have the opportunity to postpone a game if they reach a certain round, whether that be the 3rd round or the playoff round, so that clubs of both sets of fans are aware of a potential postponement coming up, not this last minute opportunity. But going to your point, Phil, it provides us a sporting disadvantage for Aberdeen if the game was postponed as well, we've got the opportunity through no fault of Kilmarnock's own. Obviously, this is the back of their success. That's what, Laurie, you get for getting European football this season. We wish we were in your shoes, I'm sure. But also what you get for not keeping 11 men on the pitch, because you're going to have Joe Wright and Stuart Finlay suspended for the weekend's game. Potential injuries, if anything was picked up over in Denmark as well. But Phil, from an Aberdeen point of view, this is an opportunity to go 9 points clear of a Kilmarnock side that finished well clear of us last season, continue to put pressure and points on teams that finished above us last season, and keep that gap, and more importantly, the momentum and excellent start to the season that we've had. So from an Aberdeen point of view, you can understand why it's no thank you.
Yeah, no, like I say, to you know, break break the fourth wall here. I put my red tinted glasses on, Glenn. You know, Kilmarnock's quite often been a sticky fixture for us. You know, especially last season, we have a woeful record against Kilmarnock. So the opportunity to play, albeit potentially depleted, tired, and you know, potentially hungover, depending on the result in Copenhagen, Kilmarnock squad would suit us so much better, like you say. But you know, the idea of that depleted Killie squad, I guess, comes back to that point in terms of Scottish football as a whole benefit. And there's very few teams in the country that have the budget to have quality squad depth. You know, even we, like we discussed earlier, even we struggle with not having the greatest quality in our depth. And I think that's, you know, why having more teams getting the funds to be able to build those squads that can compete all year round within the league in Europe is quite a good thing.
Yeah, and I think also you have to remember last season as well, Phil, you mentioned our record against Kilmarnock in general, but last season as well, after a European adventure, I want to say it was after PAOK, we were then made to go to Kilmarnock at 12:30 on a Sunday. Obviously, that's not Kilmarnock's fault for moving that game to an earlier kickoff for TV, but we've been done over on a European basis. I think I did have to laugh at one of the comments was, what happens if Kilmarnock get through? Do Kilmarnock then postpone all their games after the group stage games? But Laurie, I guess if you need any tips, Aberdeen will be able to tell you how to beat Copenhagen if you need it for this Thursday.
Yeah, I think we maybe do need all the tips and all the help we can get. And for what it's worth, on the whole thing about all the comments and it's been too short, etc. To be honest, I would actually be inclined to agree. As in, this should have been the sort of thing that was discussed, you know, before the season had started. It's something that's discussed all the time by the media, often with the big two. I'm sure someone was asked about it relatively recently because I'm sure the Ukrainian league or the Ukrainian FA have allowed Dynamo Kiev to postpone games, and you know it's not any different to that. And but at the end of the day, I totally understand that it's not great to do it from a sporting integrity point of view. I know it's a bit of a buzzword these days, but you know, if it gets postponed somehow, I'd be delighted. But to be honest, I don't see it. I'm fairly confident you're still going to have some Kilmarnock fans. Don't know about numbers, but some Kilmarnock fans joining you at Tawdry on Sunday. I'd be willing to put my neck on the line and say.
Well, I mean, there's direct flights from Copenhagen to Aberdeen if they want to cut down their travel costs and make a proper holiday of it. I suppose as well, if the game wasn't postponed, this provides a perfect team talk then pretty much for Derek McInnes, no?
Yeah, I would say it does. I mean, maybe it's a case of come out and, well, you could look at it your way and say that it give them a perfect team talk and some motivation, but then that motivation could be, well, you know, come out and prove we didn't need this game postponed, and then you could argue it kind of weakens McInnes' argument, you could say. But to be honest, you say that about quality and squad depth. The fact of the matter is, we don't have the squad depth to negotiate Thursday, Sunday at all. I'm not for 1 second going to say we do. And then it goes back to the kind of jokey comment about if we get into the group stage, do we postpone the whole league game? Of course, in reality, we don't. But let's face it, if if you postpone one, it is a case of where do you draw the line? Because Thursday, Sunday, and you guys can back this up. Thursday, Sunday is a nightmare. And then would I be right to say that you enjoyed your Thursday night football, but by the time Sunday came around, just misery, really?
I think, to be honest, whether it's on the back of having played European football or a game gets moved to Sunday because of TV, going to watch football on a Sunday genuinely isn't as enjoyable as doing it on a Friday or a Saturday. Obviously, more so the Saturday, but that's the consequences of being successful and having to have that rest period. I do think, as you said, obviously Clement's mentioned it, and I think it is something on a wider point Scottish football should look at doing for next season. Definitely, I do also think it would be extremely hilarious if Kilmarnock did get it on the back of McInnes complaining, especially after Clement complaining and not getting it, them getting packed out of Europe as well. There's a part of me that would find it funny, but also be annoyed from an Aberdeen perspective. If we look then away from all this postponement chat, because you could speak about this for a long period of time, Laurie, I'll start with you. In terms of Kilmarnock's start to the season, obviously going to Celtic first game of the season is never an easy task. You just need to ask Aberdeen. Countless times we've done that and failed to take away points on Flag Day. No goals then followed up against St Johnstone. That was a result that really kind of surprised me to see how easily St Johnstone brushed aside yourselves in your first home game of the season. Did that St Johnstone defeat have a European hangover feel to it? And are you concerned at the fact that that's 3 domestic games now without a goal?
So first and foremost, the 3 domestic games without a goal does really concern me, yeah. But I'm more concerned by the defensive frailties that appear to have come relatively from nowhere. I mean, the St Johnstone game, to an extent, felt like a European hangover, but at the same time, you don't want to use that as an excuse. I mean, I will admit, the Celtic game, everyone was like, well, Celtic, Parkhead, Flag Day, perfect storm for Celtic pretty much, and that's how it turned out. Obviously, having come off the back of losing the second leg out in Bruges, but the St Johnstone game felt like it would be something that we could stumble with that to kickstart our season, but we just didn't get going whatsoever. I don't really know what went wrong on that day. Of course, I will say, and I know this person's been linked with Aberdeen a fair bit, Adama Sidibe was all over us. And then, of course, we had the bit of the kind of moments of madness from Joe Wright, which we don't appear to have learned from. Considering Stuart Finlay did basically the same thing this week, it kind of just that just killed us in that game, and it was just that was awful to watch. I mean, and I'm more than willing to say on air, I was getting a little bit of a slagging for attending the game because I'm normally on a Sunday afternoon, I'm normally on the radio, and I did some swapping around, so I covered for someone else's show on the Saturday, and they swapped with me just so I could get to the game. And then by about 3:20, I was getting some messages saying you'd been better off staying in the studio. And admittedly, I was very much inclined to agree because the St Johnstone game was awful. I mean, I would also be willing to go on record to say that that's probably the best Craig Levein team I've ever seen.
I think that's saying something. Phil, in terms of obviously looking at Kilmarnock's domestic start to the season, there are obviously going to be elements and effects from playing on the Thursday night. But as an Aberdeen fan, you've got to look at that and think this is an absolute ideal opportunity on Sunday to make it 9 points from 9. Potential, obviously, then going to Ross County to take full 12 from 12 going into that international break after the trip up to Dingwall.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of what Laurie touched on was the defensive frailty that seems to have appeared. And it's a strange one because McInnes's teams are typically built on the back of a very solid defence that doesn't concede, and you pick up scrappy 1-0s here and there. So in the defence, correct me if I'm wrong, Laurie, is relatively unchanged from last season as well.
Yeah, so there's not really much change in that. The biggest kind of headline in that sense is obviously the addition of Robbie McCrory. The only difference is, defensively, we've signed Ollie Bainbridge, a young left back from Sunderland, who's came in, and just as we came on air tonight, Killie have finally signed a right back. A 23-year-old former Scotland under-21 international, Jack Burrows, on loan from Coventry City, formerly of Ross County, if the name rings a bell. But generally speaking, it's the same back line pretty much, barring those two, albeit one of them, of course, hasn't played yet, as I've literally just signed.
Yeah.
And Robin McCrory, who has divided opinion among Kilmarnock fans. I think he will come good, by the way, a solid addition in goal. But it's basically the same backline, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's one of the things that kind of is confused me about Killie's start is, I think with the style of play that we've kind of got this season, is it looks like it's a backline we could get at, which you typically wouldn't really say about a McInnes team or really a Killie team in general, that you can get at the back line.
Yeah, and to be honest as well, I'm on the opposite of Laurie. I know it's a signing that Killie ended up making, and there was certainly an element of the Aberdeen support were maybe keen to see Aberdeen sign in terms of Robbie McCrory. But from what I've seen of Killie so far this season, and I know it's a small sample size, but there's nothing for me to say that I'm disappointed we missed out on Robbie McCrory. I'm glad we've obviously landed with Dimitar Mitov, and no surprises to see him used today when the club announced a sponsorship deal for the official dental care partnership. I'm sure Dave Cormack's really disappointed he wasn't on the flight over from Atlanta to be used alongside Dimitar. But Laurie, in terms of the goal threat from Kilmarnock, even the goals you've scored this season, obviously the goal against Bruges was, I know Kyle's desperate to claim that, but that is definitely should have gone down as a David Watson goal. And then Joe Wright pops up in Tromso for the winner there. I know the young guys at Bobby Wales who caught the eye of a few Aberdeen fans. He scored. It's not your strikers, it's not your forward players that are getting on the goal scoring sheet regularly. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it is down to something that we saw from Derek McInnes when we first came back up, and we're starting to see it again this season. Is there's been a lot of inconsistency when it comes to the lineup, and of course that comes with the territory, with the good old European schedule again. But I mean, Kyle Vassell playing for the most part. You've got Marley Watkins who missed a few weeks of pre-season and then picked up a few niggling injuries. So obviously Vassell and Watkins were the main two, last season, but Marley struggling for fitness. Then next in the pecking order, you've got another former Aberdeen striker in Bruce Anderson, who, to be honest, I was pretty happy when he signed. We haven't really seen the best of him. And I come up short. Yeah, I was kind of thinking, would it be Vassell and Anderson as our front two? But
Yeah,
hasn't really come to fruition too much yet. I mean, of course, as you were saying about forward players not scoring. I mean, like Bobby Wales and obviously Kelvin got the first goal in Tromso. But I mean, I suppose Bath and Wales are probably the only two, are the only two forwards who have actually got on the score sheet, which is a bit worrying, and have looked quite, toothless up front. Even when you think back to the first leg against Tromso, the 2-2 draw. I mean, we started really well, got an early goal, and just totally took our foot off the pedal, and just didn't take our chances, and was almost made to pay the ultimate price for it until young Bobby Wales got us that goal in the 90th minute, and that's one that lad will always remember. What a way to get a first Killie goal, but it is a bit kind of worrying, and no one really sure what we want to play up front.
Question from Graham Gibb for you then, Laurie. Graham says from afar, Danny Armstrong seems not to be at his usual levels, and I probably cursed that by bringing that up on the podcast ahead of the weekend. Would you agree with that sentiment from Graham?
Yeah, I think Graham's right. I mean, I very much do hope that Glenn you have cursed that, but I would say that he doesn't seem to be quite at the same level. I mean, it's not for the want of trying. I mean, I think some Kilmarnock fans have been a little bit harsh and accused him of maybe not trying, etc. Obviously, his head may well be focused on other things at the moment. Of course, his contract runs out at the end of this season. As far as we're aware, Killie have been trying for, well, at least the best part of a year to get him to sign an extension. And you're not hearing any, particularly promising noises with regards to that at the moment. However, at the same time, I haven't heard too much in terms of, clubs actually interested. I've only heard a wee while back about Bolton Wanderers as a potential option. And they have bids of 400 grand, but you don't know who else um, is in for him and indeed where he wants to go. And of course, Dandy here is suggesting he wants to come to the Dons. And if for what it's worth, I think he would actually play really well in Jimmy Flyn's Aberdeen system, I think. However, I would hate it if he was to join the Scottish club. Absolutely hate it.
One final thing from you, Laurie, before I go over to Phil. If I know, and it probably feels like a big if, Kilmarnock are to get a result on Thursday night, either that be a positive result or a result that keeps them in the tie ahead of the return leg at Rugby Park. Do you think, providing the game is not postponed this weekend, Derek McInnes comes up to Aberdeen and makes wholesale changes with European progression in mind?
I think that is quite possible and almost quite probable, Glenn, because if you saw the starting lineup that Derek McInnes came out with on Sunday against Motherwell, and yes, granted that was the League Cup, it was very much a very different starting 11. Even the likes of Gary Mackay-Steven got a start, which doesn't happen. I mean, a lot of Kelly fans call for that one to happen, but it just never does. And if he's starting guys like GMF, no disrespect, you know that his eggs are in the European basket, and I kind of think that that Sunday, assuming we get a relatively positive result over in Denmark, would be a similar story, probably to Aberdeen's advantage, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was waiting to say, Phil. There will be a lot of us tuned into that game on Thursday, one way or another, probably secretly hoping Kilmarnock are still in the tie or have been thoroughly exhausted ahead of the trip to Aberdeen. And I suppose on top of that, we're possibly boosted by the fact that they've travelled to the Arctic Circle to play Tromso, come back, travelled to Motherwell, and now obviously currently in Copenhagen before travelling back to face us this weekend. It will eventually catch up with us. It almost feels like everything's lining up for an Aberdeen victory, but we can't be too complacent, can we?
No, we can't. At the end of the day, we're Aberdeen. There's always something that can go awry, but no, like I say, I think it's probably better for us if Kilmarnock do well, because arguably that will be harder work than getting papped. So, it'll take a lot more effort to go over and get a result than to get turned over. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting on Sunday, regardless. I think be interested to see how McInnes lines up. It'll be interested to see how we line up as well. Potentially seeing fresh wingers in Keskinen and Finnishes starting. So I think granted that we're all kind of the opinion that Sunday's going ahead, I think it'll be make for quite a interesting sort of I want to say tactical battle as if it's Pep versus Mourinho, but I think it'll be quite interesting to see how McInnes really does cope with try to deal with that European progression, because it was something that he really struggled with when he was in charge of us. So
Yeah, obviously he's got further than when he was in charge of us in European football as well. And it will be interesting, I guess, results dependent. But you speak about there, you mentioned both Keskinen and Vinny starting the game. Is that what you expect Jimmy to do? And obviously Ruby's served as League Cup suspension. Kilmarnock themselves have got defensive suspensions to worry about going into this game. Do you fully expect Rubizic to reclaim his starting place in place of Jack Milne?
I think so. I think Ruby will come back in. In terms of the wingers, I don't think both of them will necessarily come in from the start. I feel like one of them definitely will. I'm more inclined to say maybe Keskinen.
Yeah.
Just off the back of his goal, potentially coming and starting. But I
guess
think relatively unchanged because I mean, like we spoke about earlier, we just don't really have, the sort of quality of depth where you could easily go, oh, he'll slot in and perfectly fill the role of McGrath, or he'll perfectly slot in and be better than Sockler off the bat, sort of thing.
I guess in terms of when we spoke about Keskinen coming in place of one of the wingers, who are you dropping then, Pap or Shaden?
Yeah, I'm probably inclined to say Pap. I feel like he didn't really offer too much out wide against Queen's Park. Potentially better suited as the 10 as opposed to the winger. And it looks more like McGrath's probably going to be keeping that role just in behind the strikers. So I'd be inclined to say it's Pap that maybe goes.
Yeah. And I think John's absolutely right. We've not signed a €1 million player to sit on the bench. I fully expect, as you say, him to be starting the game. I was a bit disappointed last weekend not to see any involvement from Ante Palaversa. I guess, obviously, given the way the game played out, it didn't lend to bringing on that kind of sitting midfielder. I would just hope that we eventually do get to see that, whether that's this weekend or not. Sam Gordon saying never change a winning team. I do expect to see probably two changes this weekend. Obviously, as we've both said, Keskinen and Ruby coming in. And as we've said, obviously, speaking about this game as if it's to go ahead, I really can't see the game not going ahead. Part of me also feels that if it wasn't to be going ahead, we'd have already heard about it by now. Agreed from both of you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Well, in that case, one final thing then before we wrap up. For those that are watching live in the video, you will see a link in the description and it will be available for those on audio as well. That is to the AFC Fans Project website. Of course, the AFC Fans Project set up this season in a bid to support displays, amongst other projects as well. The Fans Project team are leading a tribute for Neil Simpson. There will be a display organised for one of our fixtures in October. No, not the last game in October, before you all go looking at the fixture calendar. And we are aiming to raise enough funds to obviously pay a suitable tribute to Simi in the form of a display at Tawdry, looking at probably one of the Hearts or Dundee United games for that. So if you can spare any amount of money, how small, how large, you are willing to donate, it would be much appreciated by all at the Fans Project team as well, so that we can really pay a very worthy tribute to Neil Simpson in there. But lastly then, thank you very much, obviously, to Phil for coming on and joining me as always. And a big thank you to Laurie for coming on and giving us the Kilmarnock view, quite literally, from the podcast that you do. Where can those that obviously like listening to Scottish football podcasts catch the KFC View podcast?
Yeah, so you can get it pretty much in all your kind of favorite podcast platforms, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. The best way you can probably do that is you can find us on Twitter at KFC View, and on there there's a link to Buzzsprout where you can basically find all the episodes and all the platforms that they're on. We tend to record on Sunday nights, and the episodes come out basically as soon as we're finished. So basically, after whatever happens on Sunday against Aberdeen, we'll have an episode out. So there'll be myself, Martin Wall, and Stephen Hope. So we'll have a wee episode we're probably, and I'm more than happy to say this, we're probably not going to be too happy with what happened on Sunday. But let's face it, Sunday's kind of an afterthought almost. We are interested in what's happening on Thursday night.
Yeah, well, hopefully the minds are too focused on Copenhagen or the return leg to think about Sunday. So for anyone wanting to catch the Kilmarnock viewpoint of the postponement debacle that's being discussed this week, and of course the game at the weekend, check out the KFC View podcast as well. If you have been watching tonight, if you've commented along, thank you very much for all input, and we've tried to get as many of you on screen as well. Please as well, if you are watching, remember to like the video, subscribe. If you are new to the channel, it's free to do so. It helps support the channel, it helps grow the channel as well. Follow us on audio. Remember to put notifications on wherever you tune into the podcast. Share, tell everyone about it. Thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks as well, as I said, to both Laurie and Phil. Until next